the League of Women Voters Legislative Conversations. We value this meeting very much because it gives us a chance to formally and informally talk with our legislators about the issues in front of you. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization which studies issues and lobbies on issues but does not endorse candidates. It is open to men and women who are residents and hopefully voters of Connecticut. Our Connecticut League is part of the New Britain Area League. Okay, one of our legislators will possibly be arriving a little bit late. One of the things that we found by moving this session to March to avoid COVID this year was that the legislature is now in full swing, and these people, some of them have been up very late at night doing public hearings before this happens. So let's thank them for that service, and we'll continue, and when our fourth person gets here, I'll introduce them. We're going to start with some identity. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists to tell us who they are, what committees they are on, and tell us what you hope can be achieved this year. If there are issues that worry you, that you would like people to be careful that things don't happen in Connecticut, those are welcome at this forum too. Pretty much anything which pertains to the state of Connecticut's laws is welcome at this forum. If you do come up with, if we do stray onto things which are national law or just local, as moderator, I may say, no, that's not state, that's another night's issue. But state issues, we're interested in all of them. So, we will also be taking questions from the audience, and I have some questions which were sent by State League. Let's begin with Representative Turco, who is from Newington presently, is kind of a visitor, and let's let you explain your situation. That's fine.
All right, is this working?
There
okay,
we go.
Great. Well, hello everyone. My name is Gary Turco. I am a current state representative in the 27th House District, which makes up about 80% of the town of Newington. And the reason I've been invited here today, that although right now I don't represent any of New Britain, if I am re-elected this year, with redistricting, the 27th district will now include a piece of New Britain. About 13% of the district will be part of New Britain, which is now represented by State Representative Manny Sanchez. He has this current part. And I'm very excited about this possibility of expanding the area I represent, besides just Newington, where I own a home with my fiance Heather that's here with me today, to also representing New Britain and working with these great legislators, both Representative Sanchez, Representative Terziak, Representative Lopes, who have all been good friends of mine that I've known for many years. I started actually as a staffer, originally an intern, back in 2001 for a former Speaker of the House, and then ended up being hired as a staffer, actually assisted all of these guys as a staff member, and then eventually decided to run for office myself. I got really motivated in 2018 when I saw some of the policies that our former President Trump was trying to implement federally, and then here in Connecticut, some of those policies were being discussed to be replicated on the state level, and that really scared me, so I decided I needed to jump in the rink and run for office myself. So currently I'm the Vice Chair of the Higher Education Committee. I am also on the Public Safety and Security Committee and on the Veterans Affairs Committee. And I'm serving my second term. And do you want me to talk about some priorities now, or move on and come back to that?
Priorities briefly, and then we'll move it on to Representative Terziak.
All right, so that's just a little bit about me. One other plug, I received my master's at Central Connecticut State University. So Central is near and dear to my heart, and all of our public institutions, community colleges, universities. They're all very, very important to me. But I'll just describe my priorities down to 4 major themes. And within each of those themes, I could talk an hour about all the different things I think we need to improve on each of these. And these guys know, it's hard to sum up priorities because there is so much that we need to do to help people. We are still coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of families and individuals have struggled economically because of the effects of the pandemic. But even before the pandemic, we had so many challenges with needing more resources for education, for mental health, with so many people that still not having access to health care, not able to find a good paying job and afford their housing. There were still so many issues. The pandemic, we have learned, has made things a lot worse. The wealthier in this state have continued to get wealthier. The lower income, middle income people have actually made out worse through the pandemic and have been hit even harder. So the 4 major themes I'm really focused on as a legislator this session and then beyond is first on that economic security, having that strong social safety net, but then helping those on the bottom, the lower incomes, being able to have that upward mobility. All right, being able to afford the cost of living, have more opportunities, increase their incomes, be able to, to make it into that middle class. And then from the middle class, build out. Make sure the middle class is stronger, more economically stable, and Connecticut could be a place where they could thrive. Okay, so that's the first major area. The second is our environment. We will continue to see the negative effects of climate change, and we need to make sure that Connecticut is a leader in helping to combat that. Diversifying our grid, making sure our electric grid is cleaner, our transportation system is cleaner, protecting natural resources. This is the air we breathe, and it's going to poison our children and future generations if we don't fight it. That's the second. The third, protecting our rights, our democracy, our voting rights, transgender, women's right to an abortion. So many of our rights that we take now as being just rights that are given to us are under attack, and we need to constantly stand up and fight for them. And the fourth area is keeping our communities safe places to live. And that is doing it by putting more funding and resources into youth services, to rehabilitation, to mental health, to people with special needs, to making sure that we're providing the resources to our law enforcement that they need to keep our streets safe, but we're also ensuring proper accountability and transparency in that process. I think we can find that good balance there and help improve our communities and our entire state. So thank you for the opportunity to introduce myself, and I look forward to getting to know you all.
Thank you very much.
Aren't we lucky to have him? Yes. Yes.
Well, welcome to New Britain, and thank you very much. This is Peter Terziak.
Hi there, Peter Terziak from New Britain. Gary didn't mention, but in the chamber, he sits like one row up, right over there. So he's one of the people I turn to away from the cameras and say, "Can you believe this? Where do those people come from? Where do they come from?" And it's not just a joke, although I'm joking. They do not come from a place where it makes it easy to understand what's going on with real people who live and breathe and work and try to get by in New Britain. It's stunning to hear people on the Gold Coast complain about property taxes. People who live in towns where they had successfully kept their property taxes from reaching as high as 13 mills are complaining about property taxes. How is my mother and grandmother supposed to stay in their house? Same thing we say, but their house is like over $1 million by quite a bit, and getting charged less than we're getting here in New Britain. It's amazing. So it really is a difference, and if we don't pay attention up there, we're the ones who are going to get forgotten. The second-tier cities in particular. Everybody can tell you we have to do better about Waterbury, Hartford, Bridgeport. But the folks who remember Willimantic and New Britain and Meriden, they're a little harder to come by, and we have to like remind some people that those are issues. I think I'm always going to want to speak after Gary, because he does such a good job that I could say, I was going to say that and that too. I'd hate to have him follow me when people could say, why didn't Terziak mention that?
Representative Terziak,
I'm-
let us know your committees at some point.
Okay, thank you. I'm on appropriations. It's one of the big three committees, and the other being judicial and finance committees, but I'm on appropriations because my parents raised me more to know how to spend money wisely than they did like how to get it. And I enjoy it. We get a chance to make a real difference there. Many of the things we count on where we look for the state for help or for rules that will make things easier are decided through appropriations, and that's important to me. In particular, I pay attention to the mental health, substance abuse, and beyond that, in general public health stuff. Most folks who know me know I'm a nurse. I spent my entire career in mental health and substance abuse. As I mentioned in a speech on the floor the other day when I was speaking in favor of a commissioner and her knowledge about substance abuse, I mentioned, I have a particular fondness for at least some commissioners. Some people are smiling there. My wife used to be commissioner of Demas. So it's interesting to have us both in front of the TV at the same time. We both take a breath at the same time to yell back. But she lets me be the one yelling. So I'm on energy and technology, where I'm particularly interested in having us pay no more than our fair share for power. There are more things we can do. New Britain and cities like us are wonderful places where we should be putting money as a state into what would microgrids and local grids look like. What would we have to do, maybe with solar, maybe with those huge batteries, what would we have to do to have this area, from the library to the school board, city hall, maybe go on up to the hospital? What would it take for that to be independent so that when we lost our lights, we knew that they were kicking in over there? So that when it was gone for days, you could come down to the library and plug in your phone to get it charged up. We should be putting more effort into that. It's a long fight, but we're fighting it up there. I'm also on the Public Health Committee, where our biggest issues in terms of hearing from people has been vaccines. Getting swamped with mask stuff, but the people who are against all vaccines is dangerous, or against some vaccines and some they're for, and they're the ones who can tell the difference, not like doctors and people like that. It's a contentious issue. We were talking about having a hearing that went like 22, 23 hours just before COVID hit. This past year, we had a hearing by Zoom that went on forever and ever and ever. I think we've done 2 Zoom hearings on this. The third one, we finally put a time limit on it. One thing with Zoom meetings is you don't even have to travel to Hartford. You can sign up, see your number 300 and say, I'm gonna go to bed. I'll wake up again at 2 o'clock and see what number I am. Too bad for those elected people who are trying to stay awake for all of it, It's as nasty a fight, by the way, as I've ever seen. One thing. So somebody sent me something being sent to us, being sent around among the anti-vaxxers. Yeah, I'll stop. Well, that said, that's Peter Terziak sleeping through the hearing. For some way, you could tell it was like around 3 o'clock in the morning or something. And by the way, if I fell asleep at 3 o'clock in the morning, by accident, listening to people who are politely listening to people who are frankly wrong, I'm okay with that. I'm just a human being. This isn't like when I used to be in charge of a unit and get mandated for night shift and people's lives depended on that. This is a public hearing. I care, but, if I did fall asleep, it's okay with me. I mention this because they had a picture of me like this. Bobby, not this Bobby, but a Bobby involved with the Democrats. I told him I'd pay him. I watched that whole hearing. Did I ever sleep? And he said, they must have gotten you with your eyes closed like blinking, because no, I never saw you fall asleep. Like, what a world. So I'm sorry for going on. One more thing. Voting rights, voting rights, voting rights. It is not an accident that they are trying to change the rules to make it harder to vote in the rest of the country. We have to do better too. And by the way, we have to stop believing we're very good. We watch them yell at other states on TV when they take away Sunday voting. Do we have Sunday voting? No. We watch them on TV when they take away the drop boxes for ballots. Do we have drop boxes spread all over the city? No. We watch them in other parts of the country where they have no excuse absentee voting, voting by mail. Do we have no excuse absentee voting except in the days of COVID? No. We watch them be criticized on TV when they take away the early voting period. Do we have an early voting period? No. Thank you very much. I hear you.
All right. Well, I'm going to go on about that because it is a concern of the League of Women Voters.
Yes.
We will be raising that issue soon.
It's huge.
However, at the end of the table here, we have Representative Bobby Sanchez.
Thank you. I'm Bobby Sanchez. I represent the 25th district. This is part of the 25th district. And I'm the chair of the Education Committee. I'm also on the Finance Committee. So there are 4 top committees up at the state capitol, and that is Approach, Judish, Finance, and Education. So just want to correct you there. I'm also on the Housing Committee. Lots of issues in housing, as we know. Many people going homeless due to the pandemic. And so we're working very hard to put more funds into Unite CT to help not only tenants, but to also help landlords, because landlords need to collect rents. So we're doing the best we can at this point, and hopefully we'll get some legislation out that will do a fix of the issue that we have at hand. But I have been really working very hard on education, of course, because I'm the chair. Myself and Manny, who's on the Education Committee, we were on a long hearing for 13 hours yesterday. And we anticipate we'll have longer hearings in the weeks to come. Because there are some very important issues. And the one that we discussed yesterday was HB 5283, which is going to change the way we fund education in the state of Connecticut. The 5283 is actually going to help everyone across the board. It's going to help the public school system, it's going to help the magnets, it's going to help the charters. Everyone will be at an equal level of funding for per pupil. In New Britain will make out pretty good, and I have some statistics here too. So if this bill was to pass, next year, New Britain will get an additional $20 million a year in education. On top of that, because that's just ECS funding, on top of that, there are grants that New Britain can apply for. And, if they want to enhance reading or enhance math, you can apply for those grants. There's also the Commissioners Network, where if a school is really failing, that particular school, the local board of ed can ask for an additional amount of dollars to work with that school for a 5-year period. And there's also the Alliance Districts. Now, the Alliance Districts will probably be phased out when it comes to this 5283. But you're getting an additional, from the city of New Britain, you're getting an additional $20 million. That's quite a big lump sum. And it would put New Britain receiving state funds to about $130 million a year in state funding for education. So it's gonna really make a huge difference. And we're hoping to get this across the line this year. We also have other very important issues at hand. We have a bill on bilingual education. We have many students that have English as a second language to them, so we want to help those students. And we also want to help students with special needs. We have not been funding special needs, special education as we should, and it's always been an issue. We have some cities that spend up to $150,000 to send a special needs child to another school from New Britain, and so we want to bring those costs down. The other thing that would help New Britain too with 5283, because we're going to be funding the magnet schools, New Britain currently sends close to 700 students leave New Britain to go to magnet schools. That takes about $2.7 million away from the city of New Britain. So guess what? On top of the $20 million, they're going to be getting that 2.7 because they won't have to pay tuition. So that's going to make a huge difference. This is going to be a huge bill that we need to pay, that we need to pass at the state level because it's going to make a huge difference throughout the state of Connecticut. And housing, I touched up on housing. Finance, of course, it's going to be very difficult because finance, we have to find the revenue to cover all the costs. And we do have, Connecticut is doing very well financially at this point. We are. Will that remain that way in a couple of years? Probably not. And we're getting additional federal funding. We received almost $1.5 billion additional for education for the next 3 years, which the school systems have been using to add social workers, to add part-time, assistants and teacher assistants and para-educators. So it makes a huge difference. And our school systems need more help.
Yes.
And another thing that we're tackling is, of course, the mental health. The emotional and mental learning for these children that are coming in due to the pandemic. Many children have not been able to connect. We all know that when the pandemic started, many of our kids did not have laptops, did not have the connectivity to get on. So many of them have lost about almost a year of education. And they're trying to catch up, and it's very difficult to catch up, particularly if you're in a classroom. And let's face it, masks are important. We understand that, but they're also very difficult for our kids. And so we're doing something about that as well now. So there's so much more that I can talk about because I mean there's so many good bills that we're going to all be looking at, and hopefully we're all going to be voting on. And once we vote on them, we're hoping that the governor will sign them because at the end of the day he would have to sign them unless we override one of his vetoes. And I will be more than willing to override a veto if it's on education. I'm telling you that right now. So we'll do what we have to do, but those are some of the key things that are very important to me. I'll pass it down now to my nephew.
Okay, our fourth legislator here this morning is Patty Sanchez, and I'm glad you could make it.
Thank you. Hold the mic close, I'm being told. So I apologize for being late. I had a family issue that I had to take care of. I think everything was pretty much covered as far as I could hear, on especially the things that I find that are very important in our state. Expanding the children's mental health and child care is a top priority of mine. We understand what the pandemic has done over the last couple of years. So we want to ensure that we are addressing those. We hear a lot about crime and children crime. Let's address the real systemic issue, which is mental health, and ensuring that we have quality child care. So that is very important to me. Tax relief for our working families, especially here in New Britain, in the form of a car tax and property tax is very important. So we'll be very focused on ensuring that we address that. And priorities of mine that myself and Representative Turco are working on is addressing the college debt crisis here in Connecticut and ensuring that we're doing stuff to retain and sustain the young working class folks here in Connecticut that have gone to school and we want them to stay here. So that's something that we will be focusing on. Roberta Willis, I'm sure is something that we'll be talking about as well, which is increasing the amount of money that students get here in Connecticut in terms of scholarships. And one thing that I really want us to focus on, especially in communities like ours, is the impact of climate change and ensuring that we address that within our curriculums, within the school systems. So those are some of my priorities at this point. I am on the Labor Committee, so I will be addressing equity issues in the workforce, and ensuring that we are doing all that we can for the people of our city and our state.
I would like to read the 4 priorities from the State League of Women Voters so that you can know that these are things that we would like to hear from you on. I do have some specific questions that go with them, but I'm not going to just stand here and read things off. Let's see how the public participation part moves forward. 1, to protect and expand voters' rights and access. We must ensure the early voting referendum is passed in November 2022. 2, to support the Citizens Clean Election Program and campaign finance reform. This has long been a League issue. Campaign finance reform is something that I remember the League supporting maybe 30, 40 years ago until we all got so bored with it, but it is critical to a democracy in our view. 3, to ensure transparency. The public must have easy access to the workings of government via CTN, public TV, universal broadband access, and active distribution of information necessary for an informed citizenship. We need the support of the legislature for CTN. It is probably the biggest way that people see their public governments at work, because those meetings are broadcast. That needs to continue. We need broadband access for all those, not based on ability to pay. It's something that has become a norm in our society, and for people to have information, there needs to be access. 4, to reverse climate change. The American Rescue Plan Act funds must be used to reduce harm and improve our air, land, and water. And I believe the legislature has some say in how those funds are administered. We'd be interested in hearing from you on that. So let me just begin with the question of, where do you stand on the early voting referendum? Will you support it, oppose it, or ignore it? And what bills would you support for voting security? Where do you stand on HB 5262 and SB 184, the 2 bills which extend the COVID allowance for the absentee ballot, and in fact create it to be an unspecified illness rather than specifically it has to be COVID-19. But for those concerned about illness who are limited in their access to voting at this point if they can't get an absentee ballot. Let's start off with that. And do we have a volunteer? Matt, it seems to be moving down towards Bobby Sanchez. Thank you.
I hope we wanted it.
Is it on? Hello? Yeah, it's on. I think it's very crucial and very important that we pass legislation, and particularly that the people go out and vote on November for the resolution for early voting. There are many states out there that have early voting already. 2 weeks to a month of early voting. It just makes sense. And there's no fraud. As much as people talk about fraud, there is no fraud.
Yeah.
And even here, and one of the things that really irritates me at times when I hear people mention voting and fraud, anyone from off the street can go into a ballot box and vote. Well, guess what? Every time I walk into the ballot box, I'm asked for my license or an ID. I have to prove that I live in the city of New Britain.
That's right, yes.
And there's a record of it. And they will jot it off and they will run it through. They have now a computer system where they run off your license to make sure that you are a U.S. citizen and that you are a voter.
Yes.
So, look, Are there mistakes that are made on machines, that machines can break down? Absolutely. No one's perfect, and things do happen. But we have to stop when it comes to voting. Voting is everyone's right.
Yeah.
And we need to ensure that everyone who can vote and wants to vote could vote. And you have people that can't leave their homes. They can't leave their homes because of a disability or because of an illness. Right, I have 2 parents right now, they're in hospice. But if they wanted to vote, they can't leave the house to go vote. So they should have that opportunity to vote by absentee ballot.
Yes.
And so we really have to stop when it comes to fighting in regards to voting. It's everyone's American God-given right, and I'm very supportive.
Thank you. Is there somebody else who wants to comment on this? We don't all need to comment on everything because that becomes repetitive, but I'd be happy to have a second.
Sure, yeah, I'd really like to add something because recently in Newington, we had a very serious threat to our voting rights and access. And it was actually the Greater Hartford League of Women Voters that was instrumental in assisting me with other advocacy groups, Common Cause and others, to fight against this proposal. The proposal was to reduce the polling places. Now, Newington is not as big as New Britain, but we have 7 different polling places. And the proposal was to reduce the polling places from 7 to 3. Yeah. It would have taken, right now we have an average of about 2,700 voters per polling place. It would have went up to over 7,000 voters per polling place. And the League of Women Voters stepped in and said, this is critical that we defeat this proposal because it will reduce access for all of Newington's residents, especially disabled and the seniors, but increase traffic and confusion and lines. And this could have been done by just a simple majority vote on the council and been a done deal for Newington with no way to appeal or reverse it. It was the public being able to stand up and say, this is against our democratic rights to access to voting that defeated it. But these are the things that we have to watch out for. I mean, I think in the legislature, we have to put some safeguards in place to prevent these things from happening in municipalities across the state. Right now, we have, I think, a lot of like-minded people in the legislature and a governor who believes strongly in supporting access to rights and expanding it with early voting, with no excuse absentee ballots. But things could change one day. And it could start going completely in the wrong direction. So the things we're putting in place now, the things that the League of Women Voters are supporting, these constitutional amendments, are so key to protecting our democracy going forward.
Let me add that New Britain is also considering charter change at this point, which will possibly impact our voting districts. And if you're interested in more information on that, call City Hall and find out when the charter revision hearings are. They're open to the public. Do we have a question from the audience? Audience, are you feeling awake enough to ask? All right, then I will continue on with my area. Let's move on to support the clean election program and campaign finance reform. And I suspect this will be fairly short because we've asked this of you just about every year we hold this, but we want to make sure that you are still where you were last year. So each of you, do you support the CEP program to send state funding to elections?
Yes. Short answer. Having participated in this program for the first time last cycle, I can assure you, it really keeps the focus in on the community and out of the hands of special interests. And I think that is extremely important, especially in communities like ours where we have to fight for every single thing that we possibly can. And we don't need to be fanning the wallets of special interests and lobbyists and other interest groups. We need to be focusing our efforts on the community, and that's what it essentially does and ensures.
Yes, as well, and I will say the program allows people to be able to run for office who may never have thought of been running for office before. I don't personally have millions of dollars or even thousands of dollars to write myself to fund a campaign. I don't have tons of these family connections or business connections for people to fund my campaign. But I knew that I could go out, door knock, get to know people in the community, and ask them for as little as $5 to contribute to the campaign and build that grassroots support. That's what you want. You want candidates, you want representatives that get to know the people for who they are, get to know the issues that are important to them, build that grassroots support that then allows them to receive a grant and run. That's the representatives I want, that's the representative I want to be, that's the people we are. We need to continue it.
Well said.
Yes.
I'm a yes.
Yes. I'm a yes.
It just matters to the league so very much. It just matters to the league so very much that that program be continued. And therefore, we wanted to hear from all of you again. Audience, questions? Mariola, would you like to come up and use the microphone so everyone can hear your lovely voice?
I just want some clarification from Bobby about the bill that you were talking about that has to do with educational funding. Does that bill take the onus of paying for education off of the property tax of communities?
I'm sorry.
Actually, it doesn't. It's the state portion of funding that comes into cities like New Britain. Now, what it will do is, just imagine if New Britain got an influx of an additional $20 million in education. I don't think that the current administration or any city official would disagree that would help the city, and they can also lower the mill rate, because then they won't have to put in additional dollars at the city side. Although the city of New Britain hasn't been that great when it comes to supporting education anyway, but and getting an additional 20 million would put a big dent in that mill rate. And then what we're talking about too is either a property tax cut as well. So there are some really good things going on right now at the Capitol that I'm hoping that we can pass and get over the finish line, and the governor will sign. The governor has said he's very supportive too. So I think that we're going in the right direction, but property tax is a whole other issue in finance that we're discussing too, because we know that we have to have a better progressive tax system in the state of Connecticut.
I have a question. Can I ask a question?
Sure, Peggy,
Yeah.
if you can speak up real loud, or
Yeah, I
we
can
could
speak
get you
up
the
real
mic.
loud, that's okay. I was very disappointed I have two questions. One, about Miss Sarah leaving as superintendent of schools. I don't know what transpired, what happened. I thought she was very good. I was very disappointed. Now we're in the process of looking for a superintendent. I don't know if the mayor had something to do with it. Did the mayor have the right to step in and say, look, we don't want this superintendent anymore? I don't know what transpired, but it was awful. Very, very disappointed, because I thought she was very good. The second question is the water bill. Do you all know what's going on with the water bill? I just want to know, I want you to tell me, they're having a meeting on Monday about our water bill going sky high. So those two issues I'd like for you to address.
Folks,
Thank you.
remember I said that this is state issues? Unless there is a
Oh.
state component to some of those questions, they're wonderful, important questions. Believe me, I share many of the concerns. But unless you can tell me that there's a state part of that, I think we're going to move on to something that's a state issue for right now.
Okay.
Thanks for raising
Well,
them,
there are
though. They matter.
representatives, and I know you all know about it, but too bad they
Yes.
can't address it.
No, they are local issues. I
Yeah.
mean, we're doing the best we can at the state level to
Yeah.
provide the funding, and we have been
Yeah.
providing millions of dollars to
Yeah.
education. We have been.
Yeah.
No one can say or point the finger at us.
No,
Since,
I don't doubt
you
that,
know,
it's the superintendent.
Right, yeah, I mean, we provided the city of New Britain close to $3 million last year in education. they're getting another 3 million this year, and if we pass this bill, that's 20 million. And the previous years, because we did a bipartisan ECS formula, and we worked that out, and we understood that cities like New Britain was not getting the correct amount of funding at the state side. So this was the fix for that. And so we're fixing our side. I can't speak on the city side.
You mean 3 million in addition to, right?
3 million in addition
I
to,
wanted to make sure you
yes,
clarified.
because I can give you, I have numbers here. New Britain receives over $100 million a year in educational funding. And like I stated before, there are also many different grants that the superintendent can apply to and has applied to. So dollars have come into the city from the state.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please do, but I would like to see if we could get you on a microphone, please. Let me see if I can stretch out there, or,
Take it away from me, you'll be happy.
Yeah, Bobby, Sanchez, you're saying that, we might be getting this money if it passes and stuff. I need to kind of understand though. As a grandparent of students in school now, because my kids are out of school, I'm interested, you said the administration does not support education, and I understand that clearly. But as a Hispanic woman, Puerto Rican and biracial, I would like that our people in this city understands that process of the importance of education and the money coming in. Because I think when they go to vote, they get more clouded by the cosmetics that's happening in Britain, in the city, like the parks and all that with the mayor, versus that important issue that second and third generations really want their kids to graduate and be citizens, that are contributing to our city, but not understanding that message. Because when I talk to a lot of Hispanics, and it could be Mexicans, Dominicans, whatever, they don't understand this. And I am very glad that I got invited today, because hearing what you're saying, I think that voters need to hear that more in their own language and breaking it down, because I think it will make more people come out on November to vote. So I really, right now hearing this, I know, because I'm pretty educated to understand a lot of the stuff that's going on, and I have people that kind of break it down to me. But it just makes it more real when you're saying money could be coming in, and I want to be sure that people understand that this is not the mayor's work, but you guys up here in the panel. Right? Thank you.
okay, thank you for your comment. Anything to respond about?
Can I
Okay,
respond
Bobby,
to that?
so we're bringing you the microphone back, and we'd be happy to hear.
You touched up on something that's very important. You're right, educating the community on how these dollars come in to the city. And not only that, it's how the city also spends dollars. Because your city officials and the mayor, of course, also have to make decisions on how they spend money at on the city side, local side. We make decisions on the state side, and then you have also your congressmen and your U.S. senators who can tell you what's going on at the federal level. Absolutely. Another thing that people don't understand is that on the education committee, we control also school construction. Now, I know that it's been a really heated topic because of some things that have happened within the department, and they're taking care of that, they're dealing with that. But we approve the dollars that come in to construct new schools. And Britain usually gets 79% return rate on a school construction project. And in the last two school construction projects, I have been able to push that to 95%. That's huge. It really is. And people have to understand, and I do that because I know New Britain is not it's not a Glastonbury or a Greenwich. They can afford, we can't. And it helps our taxpayers, because New Britain still has to put in that other percentage. And instead of putting in 20%, they're only putting in 5%. So that saves about $8 million to the taxpayers. Taxpayers, that's money that you have to pay. So these are things that we do have to reach out and let people know more of. And I'm more than willing to do forums and get people to come in and learn more about what we do at the state side. I'm pretty sure that my nephew Emmanuel, who was a councilman for 10 years here in New Britain, can probably touch up on what the city has done. But that's very important. You're absolutely right. It's educating the community because it's New Britain's got a lot of things going, and they do. The parks are beautiful. There's a lot of good things, but it's not just only that. And we got to get people to understand that if you want a beautiful park, you have to pay for it, and that comes from taxpayers. And how do you pay for it? And what percentage comes from the city? Because there's a lot of projects in the city of New Britain that have had support at the state level and at the federal level because the city applies for federal and state grants. So a lot of people need to know that and they don't. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Audience, other questions from you? Yes, okay, come on up again, Mariel. I'll give you my microphone. We need everybody to speak in the mic because then it gets on the camera.
Very good.
Just recently, there's been a lot of publicity about the right to die legislation, and I just was wondering where that's at the state level and how you feel about it.
Peter,
Thank you.
it's a good question for you, Peter.
Peter, you look like you're looking for the microphone. It's
There it
over on the other side.
Let me tackle where it's at first. This has been coming up in front of the legislature every year or two for at least 14 years. There are 11 states and I think Washington, D.C., around there, that have formally passed this legislation. We had a very long and painful public hearing about it in the last week or so, as they always are. And yesterday, the Public Health Committee voted the bill out of committee, which was done last year and was, for supporters, a huge and happy event. For opponents, a huge and sad event. It was the first time it was ever voted out of committee. It did not get taken up by the Judicial Committee. This year's bill is more restrictive in who is able to use aid in dying and what is required to qualify for aid in dying. People who would have been able to use it in the last bill won't be able to use it in this one. However, the trade there was going back to the more restrictive language, which we've tried to pass without success before, is believed by many people to mean that the bill could go straight to the House, straight to the floor of the legislature without having to go to another committee. Because with the makeup we have right now of the Judiciary Committee, they're never gonna have a discussion about it, let alone a vote. So, if you hear people complaining about how it used to be a good bill, but now, this is why. Will we pass it or not? It's a very tough one. This I know, people who hate it are gonna vote for it because there's a feeling of who am I to tell somebody else in their family how it should be at the end. It's a tough one. And actually, another reason why some people who hate it will vote for it, some folks, like me, don't think it's guaranteed for certain that our religion will be the one that most of the people making the decisions participate and grew up in. So if the only opposition for something can be about your religion, let's try deciding things on religion while we're still like looking at each other and coming from religions that we grew up in, that, our neighbors grew up in. We have new neighbors. People are changing. America and the world is changing. Let's start making our decisions based on we're people and what's best for us, and let our religious experience help guide us to be better and make better decisions. But let's not have it be something that's imposing rules and negative rules on people. And I think that's a very important part of this discussion, maybe the most important.
Anyone else want to comment on that?
You're crazy if you do. There is no winner.
Okay.
Yeah, I have another question.
Okay,
I guess I'll
please
get
get
on the microphone.
Thank you
I
so
still
much.
wanted to hear about the water bill and. But nevertheless, I got this from Johanna Hayes. She sent out, weekly, and I like that. I like participating in what she has to say and what's going on with her as a congresswoman. And she said, this is a bill that says that presently, those people who have student loans or student debt, presently, they do not have to worry about paying anything right now until May or June. And so if I'm a student that's in debt, I don't have to worry about paying that bill until May or June. I'm relieved for that period. The second part is that they're working on getting us to have $50,000 knocked off that bill. Knocked off the bill that I have. Say I have $25,000, $100,000. I'm getting $50,000, I hope, off the bill. She says that the Biden administration is working on that. What do you know? I mean, that's just pending. Is there anything more up to date on that? Will students be able to knock off $50,000 off their debt?
Federal.
Okay, it sounds like this is a federal bill. Can we give it a brief answer if you know some information that could help?
As of right now, I think Peg, you're right on the money. It is something that's still being discussed, and then there's a lot of pending perspectives on how to get that done. In a similar fashion, Gary and I are working on a bill. We still have logistics to work out, figure out how to pay for it, make sure that it's sustainable, and I'm pretty sure if we're doing it at this level, and Johanna's advocating, Congresswoman Hayes is advocating on the federal side, they're very much doing the same work that we're trying to do here in Connecticut as well, to create that sort of relief that you're talking about. Because I would benefit from it. I know I got some student loans to take care of.
Right.
That's for sure.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's return to some of the state league priorities. The one on transparency, and I'd like to focus in on the universal broadband access question. New Britain is a long way from meeting that standard, as too many households here cannot afford internet connectivity. What is the best route for the legislature to help improve this?
We passed the bill.
What the heck did they do in East Hartford that they're going to have broadband connectivity throughout their entire city? And why didn't we do that in New Britain? We have a great health institution, we have a state university, we have a lot of reasons it would be good to do it. That's the kind of stuff that makes people who have those jobs that pay a fortune and you can stay home and do it from home during the pandemic. That's the kind of stuff that makes people who are able to live and spend like that decide where they want to live. That's just huge. Imagine if we could get on. Now, whatever East Hartford did, they did good for them. The question is, now what can we do to create that environment and that possibility? And it's nice East Hartford did it because we're back to those middle-sized cities again. This isn't just an issue for Hartford and Bridgeport. What can we do for East Hartford and New Britain and Willimantic and Meriden so that we can all be benefiting like that? It's a question we're talking about in the Energy and Technology Committee, and there really isn't a side that's ahead right now, which is one of the reasons it's good for communities and organizations to pick a side and get involved. Thank you.
Not only is it the wealthy who need it, Many of our people in New Britain, if you need to talk to Social Security, you need to do it through online.
Right.
When you go to apply for a job, you need to do it online. This is something which impacts our community very strongly. And I hope there will be some monies coming forth or grants coming forth that the mid-sized cities could apply for.
Yeah. We do too.
Someone want to take a mic there? Besides,
Yeah, I'll just say, I know we're not supposed to focus so much on federal issues, but I believe in the federal infrastructure bill, there is money to help with broadband as well, and some of that is grants we have to apply for. Some of that's, funding the state's just going to get, but we will have to make sure as a legislature we prioritize that to help cities with universal access to broadband in an affordable way.
okay, thank you. Audience, your turn. Questions from you? Okay, come take a microphone again.
Either one.
I think I might address me, right? And childcare? Yeah. My question is, I personally know families that can't afford childcare right now. Have to work 2 jobs, which is unfair especially when you have little ones. You should be going home to have a good dinner and spend some time, especially when children nowadays are being affected by mental health and stuff with the pandemic and stuff. But with that being said, like I said, personal families and members and people that I know with this situation, but I'm sure that in New Britain there's other families with the same situation. What can we do to fix this for everyone?
So I think Representative Bobby's saying should be far better suited to answer that question because he's got a lot of amazing stories that we've heard on the committee side.
It's true.
So, as a former preschool teacher, I can tell you I'm presently working on a bill. I'm going to do the finishing touches to the bill tomorrow with advocacy groups from across the state. The legislature is going to be in shock by the amount it's going to cost. But something has to be done. And so this bill will touch up on not just public daycare and school readiness programs, which are state funded, but it also will help home daycare programs. It would also help private daycares, because believe it or not, there have been some private daycares throughout the state of Connecticut that have shut their doors because they cannot get parents to pay more or to pay their staff. This bill that I'm working on also has a compensation schedule attached to it, meaning that preschool teachers will finally get the respect that they deserve because we tell them to get their bachelor's degrees and we don't give them any additional dollars.
Right.
You have teachers with bachelor's degrees that are making about $30,000 a year, and they have families to feed, kids to feed.
Wow.
Of their own. So this would push that salary compensation to about $50,000 to $55,000. So this is why I said it's going to be costly, but we need to do it. We need to do it if we're going to save the industry. Right now, it's in a downslide, and it's going to continue going that way if we don't intervene and do something about it now. Now, this is something that since I've been on education, I have been fighting for, advocating for, and there's just the funding is never there. But I think that we can get at least a partial amount of funding for this bill that would help. And it would help parents with care for kids. So it bumps the percentage rate of what you would get for care for kids so that you wouldn't have to pay too much out of pocket. And in fact, right now, the average low-income parent pays about 10% of their income. We want to bring that down to 7%. And I think that's also something that at the national level they're talking about. Build Back Better was a bill where child care services and affordable child care has been talked about. And it's not a Democratic thing. It's a Republican and Democrat. It's a bipartisan bill that would pass if it only had to do with child care. Because child care affects everyone. It doesn't matter what party you're from, it affects everyone. So I know that we can probably get it out of the Education Committee. I don't know how far it will go from there. But we're going to be advocating, and I'm sure you're going to hear in the next couple of days about a day of action where many daycare centers and childcare centers throughout the state of Connecticut are going to close their doors for a day to protest and say, do something now, help us. And I'm there with them, and I'm going to join them in the protest because it's time that we do something about it. So yes, very important.
Yeah. We haven't talked at all about environmental issues. Whether you wanted to comment on the American Rescue Plan Act funds or some other aspect, Connecticut is home to the Long Island Sound. We have issues of separating wastewater from rainwater throughout the state in order to preserve the sound. We have brownfield issues in our cities, probably also in our suburbs in some places. We have species that are going extinct because of land usage. Any of these areas, are they on the top of your agendas as well? I'm seeing a nodding out of Manny.
Real quick, I definitely agree that we have to do something about the environment. And on the educational side, there is a bill on climate change. Right now, currently, last year when we passed the model curriculum, which still needs to be developed, we stated that climate change should be part of that climate curriculum from K through 8. The bill that we have now is for high schoolers to make it a mandatory that they teach climate change. They are teaching climate change in the science curriculum, but it's just not enough. And there are certain school districts that just don't touch at all the issue of climate change. So we want to change that because it's so important for our children to understand the importance of climate change and the effects of climate change.
I'm particularly interested in pushing solar. We can do a lot more. We need to be doing a lot more. We won't need, for sure, that new gas plant that they want to put out in eastern Connecticut. That's a particular example of you can name how much and where we can get the solar to use. Instead of that, we now have battery technology that means that the energy that comes in is not just when it's coming in. You can set it aside to use it when it's dark and when you lose your electricity. The other thing I want to mention when we talk about the environment, we should never forget when we succeed. Connecticut may be the last state, if we're not, we're one of the last two, where we have a law that says drinking water cannot come out of a body of water that has had treated wastewater put into it. We are in a nation where we are competing economically with cities that are spending money on building plants to take wastewater and turn it directly into drinking water. You know, you can drink your pee. The astronauts have proved it. They can, you know, but I think most people would prefer to have fresh, natural water that's never been in that kind of danger. We have that in Connecticut. We need to push it and we need to protect it.
I agree.
We're moving as a state towards a zero emissions, from carbon fuel by 2040, I think is the goal that we set, and we need to move that up even sooner. The biggest polluter, though, as far as emissions, is not electrical grid, it's transportation system. It's our cars, our buses, our trains, everything that's using fossil fuels to burn. And anybody that's been filled up their car at the gas tank recently knows how much it's costing to do that. I just filled up my car, was $59. That really hurt. So we have to continue to push away from our reliance on fossil fuels. Not only is it bad for the environment and relying on foreign entities, which when we see the shifts in the world dynamics, what's happening now with Russia and Ukraine, how that affects our prices here, but also it's good for the environment, it's good for the air that we breathe, it's good for our future generations, and we're stopping climate change. So moving towards electric vehicles, buses, trains, providing incentives, bikes, more pedestrian friendly roads and bicycles and things like that is what we have to keep pushing for, and we're way behind, so we're playing catch up.
And I'm part of a small working environmental group, and we had a scare not too long ago here in our city And I'm actively fighting and trying to limit strip mining, especially in urban communities and urban spaces. So that is very important. And then protecting our green spaces, especially in urban centers. So those are areas of focus for me and a large area of focus for the group that I'm actually working with right now.
Okay, thank you. Audience?
I just want to say that you talked about going electric, but I was talking with people who do own electric cars. Their problem is not enough stations. So you push for more electric cars, but where are the stations? You're gonna have to get more of that too.
In the bipartisan bill that has passed Congress, there are, 50,000 more stations? It's going to support 50,000 more stations in the U.S.
Okay, you're gonna bring up more.
That'll help bring up more.
Okay.
We need to make it
Gotcha.
more cost-effective for people to have a charging station at home. We need to figure out a way for people to share a charging station in apartment buildings. But this is all eminently doable. This is not a big jump from that big jump of nothing to where we are now. This is taking what's succeeding and pushing it out there. And we're fortunate there's gonna be federal money to help with that. Just gotta brag a little bit. One of the president's main advisors on environmental stuff is Gina McCarty, who used to head the DEP, the Environmental Protection Agency in Connecticut, and left us with a pretty good list of things we need to be accomplishing, and is now working on it at the federal level. Some of us have stayed in touch. We're working very hard on making that accessible to people who don't have their own home, to for people who've done the stretch to getting to a vehicle but don't have an extra $300 or $500 to be installing a charger at home right now. But yes, we can do better, and you're right, we need to, and there is a plan to. Thank you.
Thank you. A year ago or so, the Police Accountability Act passed. We've had a little time to see it work. It probably will need more time before we see what tweaks it needs. Have you any observations on how it's working and what you might like to see changed in it or kept in it? Peter?
I think it's working great. I like when I read in the newspaper that some communities got to pay attention to their statistics on who gets stopped and why. That's part of it. When a community has to say, it's fair that we stopped a higher average of people with color who were driving than of white people. Nobody, except for like the departments who are trying to justify that, tend to agree with that as being fair. Nobody. And that's one of the things that bill lets us do. And by the way, that keeping those statistics and stuff, that's being done by folks at CCSU. We're lucky to have them. I don't see very much in that bill that I don't like. And when I look at it, when I think for myself, my main priority is to protect it. Period, end of story.
So I've said right from the beginning, I think a lot of us in the legislature said that we were always willing, after that bill passed, to take a look and make sure that it was working in the way that we wanted to. And if there was any tweaks that needed to be made, we'd be open to that. And we already have made last legislative session some minor tweaks to some of the areas, working with law enforcement and other advocacy groups that we needed to make. On the Public Safety Committee right now, one of the areas that was in the original bill was requiring that all police departments be accredited by an outside organization called CALEA. And we are discussing a change on that they be accredited by POST, which is an internal organization who's accredited by CALEA. So those type of things are worth, I think, debating and making sure that the full intent of that legislation is realized without any unintended negative consequences. And I'll continue to do that. But what I want to make clear is that some have tried to equate an increase in crime in certain areas to the Police Accountability and Transparency Bill. And that is completely false. The rise in crime started before the police accountability bill was ever passed, and certainly before it was ever implemented. There are still parts of it that haven't even been implemented. The rise and spike in crime, and especially in the area with car thefts and car break-ins, which we see in New Britain, we see in Newington, other communities, started right at the time of the pandemic hitting at its hardest in March of 2020.
That's true.
And and the crime issues we're facing are a result of the pandemic. And we are trying to combat those now and working with municipalities, the state, and law enforcement to do so. And we've made some modifications in some state policy, put some funding in some areas to do that, and we will continue to do that. But I don't want that to be a reason that people point to a need to change that bill. We need accountability, we need transparency. If there are parts in that bill that aren't doing that correctly, then we do need to work with law enforcement to change that. But it isn't because of rise in any stats that should point to the reason.
Thank you. In that same direction, there have been what is seen as an increase in youth thefts by now, thefts by youth, not thefts of youth. There are, I'm sure, a number of bills circulating the legislature to address this at this point, changing status of youths when they are arrested, etc. Have you any comment on that?
We know through science that people's brains aren't done being developed, especially the rational decision-making parts,
That's right. It's a fun thought.
the most polite parts, until you're around 26 years old. So when we're raising the age and saying that a 15-year-old cannot be treated as an adult and locked up in an adult prison for decades, we're being backed up a bit by by science right there. There are a lot of people who are looking at the increased crimes, particularly what Gary mentioned, cars, other things. We're not talking robbing a museum or a bank, but look at some young people doing that and say, we've gone too far, we gotta be locking 15-year-olds up, and the first little crime, let's get hard on them, that'll keep worse things from happening, which, by the way, we also know through experience and history is not true. That was the New York broken window pane. You deal with a broken window pane before the whole neighborhood falls apart and turns into a den of crime. It didn't work. It led to abuses like stop and frisk, like our kids couldn't walk on the street without fear of law enforcement. Right now, when we have law enforcement talking in terms of we have to cut down on interactions with the public, where we're just going and seeing if they're afraid of police or not, and concentrate more on crimes. This is an opportunity to be making some progress that way. We have to follow it up. Good for the city of Hartford that's put together a crisis intervention response team made up of a state agency that'll handle the most adult mental health things, and I think we have a clinic for children and somebody else for substance abuse issues, where the 911 operator will send out the right team instead of the police.
Right.
We need to be adopting that visit here too. That's another way that we can keep young people from ending up on the wrong track. We can't just have only one track, only two tracks. You can go to college or you can go to prison. It's all the same to us. You're in high school. We can do better than that, and we have to.
Thank you. Are there other issues out there which you would like to talk to our legislators about? Sure. Just take the microphone or
Yes.
get it over to them. Thank you.
Is it working?
Yep.
I'm Jeff Bright, president of the New Britain Institute. We are the 501c3 that works with the library, youth museum, and the industrial museum. And we've had a partnership with the city of New Britain since 1901.
Wow.
We provide building, the city provides the income to pay staff and operating costs. As I've gotten older, I've learned that just really how important education is. But it's not the same education or the same way to reach everybody. I've gone through certain testing, and I know that I don't learn well by listening, you know. I'm a hands-on person, and I think a lot of our education really looks at the answer being send everybody to college. That's going to give them a better job, and that's not everybody. What we've lost is anything that approaches an apprentice program. Manufacturing today isn't the greasy, dirty, grimy, dangerous place that it was 100 years ago. It's a very high-paying potential job. You know, within probably 5 to 10 years, you can be making over $100,000. How many kids going to college, getting a liberal arts degree, can do that? So one of the things that we've done here at the library is we have a hands-on learning center. We have a makerspace.
Yeah.
We've talked about doing a tech-based makerspace in conjunction with the Industrial Museum. One of the things that we'd also like to do is talk to the Chamber of Commerce and work with today's manufacturers who all could expand based on what they're saying, but they don't have the manpower, the woman power that is trained. And I know that the state started the position of Chief Manufacturing Officer in Colin Cooper, who's actually, his grandfather is the one responsible for building this building here in 1975.
That's interesting.
Which is a really nice twist. So how successful has that program been on a state level to bring back manufacturing? Because you clearly cannot support a tax base on residential uses. You need manufacturing. And manufacturing has proved that they're strong enough to expand and somehow stay competitive in this world, you know, where other countries are paying salaries just a small fraction. If you look at today's manufacturers in Connecticut, they've spent a fortune on computers and robotics, really handling the repetitive jobs, you know, and leaving people to do the more creative jobs. So I'm wondering, you know, what's your take on what can the state do to bring this further, to carry this on before we kind of lose this aspect? Not everybody is going to learn by reading or listening, you know. They're going to learn by doing.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm advocating, that we not focus on that, but we include it in funding.
Yes,
I'm going to hand the microphone back to Bobby because I'm
Thank
sure
you.
he has things to tell us.
Yes. So everyone knows that we had Commissioner Miguel Cardona, and Miguel Cardona was taken by the Biden administration to be the Secretary of Education. And when Miguel came on as commissioner, we sat down, I actually sat down with him twice to talk exactly about how things are done at the school level. You know, I hear from many students that say, you know, we go to school, we listen to the teacher, she puts up something on the board, we read a book, we go home with homework. We're bored out of our minds. Yeah, so I'm like, you know, I'm always an advocate of hands-on learning, because when you're a preschool teacher, that's when you do a lot of hands-on experiences, and that's how kids learn. And this has been an argument that I've been talking about since I've been on the Education Committee. We do have a bill, though, this year. We've had passed legislation where we're actually making it a little easier. New Britain High School right now does have an industrial where kids can learn how to operate a machine, and I believe they have a memo of understanding or so forth with some of the manufacturers here in the city of New Britain, where they will lend some of the machines to them, or have some of their people that work there to come in as instructors and so forth, which is a good thing. If you haven't seen it, New Britain High School does have an area where they specifically do that. And I went to visit that area before the pandemic, and I was really intrigued by what they're doing there. That being said, I think that should be done in every high school. I think that every high school should have a pathway for kids. It's not just about going to college. Yes, it would be great if all our kids went to college, but guess what? Not all children want to go to college. So if you can give them a trade, whether it's operating a machine, or learning to be an electrician, or learning to be a plumber. I don't know about you, but if you're a homeowner and you call a plumber, aren't you they're making good money. They make more money than I do. A plumber and an electrician makes a lot more money than I do, and I have a master's degree. And sometimes when I talk to these plumbers, they go, "No, I just went to trade school."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "So you didn't have to have a huge, tuition to pay or debt?" And they go, "No." And I'm like, "And so you're probably making about, what, $50 an hour? $75, $90 an hour?" I'm like, God's sake, I wish I was young so I can go back to the trades. But look, we have to do that. We have to do more of that. Right now, we have a bill in education that we heard last night. It's called an Act Concerning Opportunities for Students to Participate in Pathways Programs and the Provision of Information about Availability of Technical Education and Career Schools and Regional Agricultural Science and Technology Education Centers. So that's also teaching kids about agriculture.
Yes.
We heard from students last night who have said, working with cows and pigs and sheep and learning about the environment and how to grow, plant trees. And I was just so intrigued by what I was hearing from these kids that were going to our agricultural science schools. I think that we should have more of that available in the state of Connecticut. And you're absolutely right. I truly believe children learn better with hands-on experiences. The problem is now at the federal level, and this is why I brought up Secretary of State Cardona, is that the feds have these laws that we have to follow. That kids have to take exams that they have to pass in order to know where they are with reading and math and science. So I'm like, personally me, I don't like exams. I did horrible in school when it came to testing. But if you had me do a research paper or do some hands-on activity, aced it, no problem. That's what we need to do. So we have to also convince people at the federal level that at the federal level, some of their policies have to change as well in order for the states to make real good policy changes. We have people that want to add more free time for kids in the school. Right now, I think there's only like 20 minutes that's spent on like a break for kids at school. We have had bills submitted that they wanted to extend that for an hour. But we can't because of federal guidelines that we have to follow. If we don't follow the federal guidelines, then we don't get the federal funding.
That's right.
So it takes two. It takes the state level. We're ready at the state level, and we have relayed these messages to the Secretary of State and of Education. And hopefully we'll get something done soon because you're absolutely right. We need to do more on manufacturing. Industrial arts. Look, when I was going to school, I learned how, I had industrial arts, I had home economics, I learned how to cook and sew and type. All that when I was going to school. You go to school now, these kids don't get that. They don't get that. So when I was on my own, after I left home, I knew how to cook. I knew how to iron my own clothes and how to sew my own clothes. I didn't have to depend on anyone. And I think all our kids need that.
Good job. I'd like to mention two things. One is what's going on in our technical schools in an effort to get them to be closer to providing the good payoff training for jobs that we need. There's talk of separating technical schools out of the rest of the present education department. It would still be education, but it would be more focused that way for the technical things. And one thing they are doing, whether we make that change or not, is They've invited Connecticut manufacturers to come in and help them design their curriculum so students will be prepared for jobs that are available now and for jobs that they say they will have available in 5 years. And that'll help make a big difference. We know it'll help make a difference because of the other thing I want to mention. Electric Boat has big business planned for a couple of decades. They've seldom built as many submarines at the same time. They're getting a lot of business for the repairs and maintenance of submarines. They're desperate for workers. We're competing with Bath Boat Works in Maine for workers right now, for all good paying jobs. We have an EB pipeline in Connecticut. Call up Electric Boat and say, I'd like a job, but I think I need training. And you'll find yourself in the EB pipeline, being trained to be an electrician, being trained to be some kind of a plumber, being trained on like a welder. It goes on and on. We have a few people in New Britain who are participating in this now. We need to take that success and spread it around, you know?
One of
Yes.
the things that I've heard from local small manufacturers is that we train the people, we start them, and then the big companies come in and take them.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and how do you kind of put a damper on that, you know? Because you still want that incentive.
One of the things we can do is make it easier for the little companies to compete for employees by providing benefits more similar to what the big companies, because the big companies aren't bringing people away because of the glory of working for the big name. They're doing it for money and benefits.
Right.
Period, end of story.
Right.
And your local guy, if we give them help with money and benefits, they can toss in the message, you can walk to work,
Right.
or you can take the bus to work.
Right.
So we're finally we should soon get off the ground the plan we passed back when I was in the Labor Committee, where employees who do not have a retirement plan will contribute a small percentage of their own money. The boss doesn't have to contribute anything, but so that people will be starting. The hope is, and what we've heard from bosses is, if you set it up and make their employees put money in, it's surprising how many people say, we'll put in a little bit, you know? We had people come in and testify and say, you do that, get employees used to the idea of their saving whether they like it or not. And we'd like to come in and try and sell them a better retirement plan. Let's have a little bit of free market competition here. I'm okay with that. We wouldn't be talking about the state plan if the private sector was doing the job they would like to be able to do, succeeding in reaching the people who work every day and don't have any benefits and have a boss who would love to see them have a good retirement plan but can't afford it. We can help out with that, and we have to do that. We have to do that when it comes to retirement things. Some of us have spent, it seems, our entire adult life fighting to let small businesses and nonprofits into the state healthcare pool. It's stunning how much people pay for insurance, how much more it costs to give insurance that you don't brag about to your employees, for how much more it costs to do that than it costs state employees, the state to pay for insurance because of how many employees they have. But that's just on its head. The very people we're asking to pay the bills so that we can have a good insurance plan for some of us, we're not letting into that insurance plan. And we need to finally break through that barrier and get that done too. And those are a couple of ways we can do it. We're probably not going to subsidize wages forever. But wages are not the only way that people compete, and we can help them with every other way people compete. And we've got some of that coming up, and we need more of that too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that's probably time to do a wrap-up. We have covered a lot of subjects today. Before we even do a wrap-up, though, let me thank the New Britain Public Library for welcoming to this space. It's available to the community. We've covered voting rights, we've covered health care, we've covered insurance, we've covered job training, we've covered environmental issues. We have talked about broadband, we've talked about Nutmeg TV, we have talked about Police Accountability Act and youth crime, about the model curriculum for climate change, about the Citizens Election Program law, which finances campaigns, all extremely important issues. If you want to comment on an issue, go to cga.gov. That's the website of the Connecticut Legislature. You can find your way through that and you can write your opinion about testimony that's coming up. Or you can stay up and try to participate in a hearing. We hope that you'll be active citizens. We hope that you'll be involved, voting, and letting your legislators know what your needs are, what your wishes are for a better Connecticut in the future. Legislators, we know you are very busy. We wish you well through this session. We trust you with safeguarding our future, and we hope that we will see you again next year. Thank you.